What's up, Rad Lads? It's me, Rad, and I want to be here to talk a little bit about the Fallout 76 map update and expansion, Burning Springs. Let's take a look and talk about it. Alright, today's a hat day because I haven't been able to get into the barber. Oh, that doesn't actually look that bad. It's been looking a lot worse. Hat's going back on. And I'm thinking about maybe growing a winter beard. I don't know. Let me know if you guys want me to do that. Back to what we were talking about though. Burning Springs looks very interesting to me. I am looking forward to it, but it's not without some controversy, of course, because it doesn't seem like anything can happen in Fallout 76 without a little bit of controversy. I am a huge fan of map expansions in Fallout 76 as opposed to expeditions, which I think are cool. I just like these permanent additions to the map that we're able to go to and from at will whenever we want and have less of an on-rails experience, which is a huge reason why I love Fallout, because it's not an on-rails type of game. So I've been able to play a little bit on the test server, not a lot, just a little bit. I watched an interview, the Inside the Vault dev chat, and I've read some articles to get my head around what this update is going to be like, what we can expect, and whether or not it's something to be excited about. This will be the Fallout series' first foray into Ohio, which most people wouldn't be excited about, but I'll let you know something. Back when I was making videos about what a Fallout game would look like in certain areas, like Detroit, or Anchorage, or what was the other one? Chicago, that's it. I had people vote in the comments on what the next location should be, and wouldn't you know it, Ohio was weirdly high up on the list. Regardless, one of the most obvious things when we learned about this new expansion into Ohio is that it doesn't look anything like Ohio. It looks like a desert. In fact, it looks more like it should be on the West Coast, maybe even in the Mojave, more than it should Ohio, and that got a few people's feathers all ruffled. That wasn't the only thing though, because some of the developers said something that also got people kind of riled up, and I'm going to quote the dev chat here where it said, "The new region is terrifyingly beautiful and will feel very familiar to fans, drawing its main influences from Fallout 3 and New Vegas." Small interjection, those are my two favorite Fallout games, so this already has me intrigued. We wanted it to remind folks of what they came to know and love in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. And so, when we set to make out this new region, the three pillars that we gave to the team were, it's got to have desert, death claws, and raiders. And to me, that captures the tone, the essence, and the danger of those games. So a lot of people heard or read this and immediately started to jump down the dev's throat because they thought that his idea of what Fallout New Vegas is, its essence, what it is at its core, is death claws, desert, and raiders. Obviously, those are not the defining characteristics of New Vegas. Yes, it takes place in a desert. Yes, it has death claws rather prominently because it helps block off a new player's direct route into New Vegas. And it does have raiders, although to a much lesser extent than I would say Fallout 3. I am going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they don't actually think that the essence of New Vegas is desert and raiders and death claws and basically nothing else. What I think they were going for is more the atmosphere and kind of what it makes you feel like as you're moving through the game. I think if most people were asked what the essence of New Vegas was, they'd talk about the choices that you're able to make. They talk about the in-depth factions or quests or missions, the kinds of things that sets New Vegas apart from all the other 3D Bethesda titles. Now to move on from that, a few people weren't happy that Ohio was portrayed as a desert. I take slight offense to that since I've basically grown up in one my whole life. It's not that bad, but it appears that there's a very good reason for this, and it all comes down to the Abraxadine Corporation, the company that makes Abraxo Cleaner amongst a plethora of other things. One of the first things we see when we cross the bridge to start the Burning Springs adventure is a truck that has released some Abraxadine chemicals, and it's this red substance. from what I've been able to gather, this seems like it will be a pervasive theme throughout the entire expansion, and it appears that this is the reason that Ohio looks the way it does. It almost makes me think of Agent Orange or something from the Vietnam War, a chemical that is so deadly and so toxic that it kills all sorts of life. Animals, plants, you name it. And it's well established that if you wipe out a bunch of plants and their root systems are no longer able to hold soil in place, you create dust bowl-like conditions. So that seems like a very reasonable and logical way for Ohio to become a desert. Also, we know Abraxadine has really screwed up other places like Pittsburgh, which became the pit, in large part due to the chemicals that Abraxadine was creating, and they, when mixed with the radiation and devastation from the nuclear bombs, turned the pit into the cesspit, that we see in Fallout 76 and in Fallout 3. But what this does mean is that we will see sandstorm weather effects, which should be a very cool thing to experience for the first time in Fallout. In the Burning Springs revealed trailer, we also see some sort of community that has this giant gate and a metal Deathclaw skull with flames coming out of its eyes, and there's something about it that just screams to me Mad Max. In particular, the newer movies that have come out, it seems very metal, very Mad Max, and I am totally down with this aesthetic. Mad Max has had an impact on the Fallout series from the very first game, and it'd be cool to see that progress through these other games and honor some of the newer Mad Max movies that have come out. Now to start, of course, you have to go across the Silver Bridge, which has been reconstructed by none other than the Mothman cultists, because they want to expand west. They want to bring the Mothman religion, the cult, to more people, but they run directly into some pretty tough resistance. That said, they did say they built this expansion with new players in mind, that players that don't have a lot of levels behind them could cross the bridge and experience what this expansion has to offer. So I do wonder how they will balance that, because in my initial playthrough, it's actually fairly difficult. I've been having a hard time, but I kind of need to rebuild my character, to be honest. It's kind of a stale build right now. One of the things that they talked about a few times were rad hogs, and they show it a few times in the trailer and in the dev chat. Those things are looking gnarly. But wild hogs are something that I've thought for a long time are very appropriate for a Fallout setting. Hogs in general, or boars, seem to be able to survive just about anywhere. They are so hardy, but they're also so mean. They seem like a creature that would be able to survive in an irradiated wasteland, especially if they get some pretty crazy mutations. We were also warned that the rad hogs will react uniquely in blast zones, so if we launch a nuke and there are rad hogs in the irradiated area, something crazy is supposed to happen, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. The devs also talk a lot about the Rust King, who is an intelligent super mutant who basically controls all or most, I'm not quite sure yet, of the area of Burning Springs. And they also say that we may see more of him in the future, so it looks like they have some long-term plans. I thought it was interesting that they said they wanted to bring an intelligent super mutant into the mix in a way that is more reminiscent of the older games, since super mutants by and large nowadays have been overwhelmingly stupid. There are apparently 2 new public events. One I find very interesting, the other not so much. The first one being an event where we have to raid an area and gear up a Deathclaw. We see a Deathclaw with armor on it, and apparently part of this event is to go and find that armor and put it on a Deathclaw. I think this is really cool. These Deathclaws are apparently tamed to some extent. There is a tamer, and there was a hint dropped that if you kill or maybe attack the tamer of the Deathclaw, that something could happen. And to me that sounds like the Deathclaw just loses its shit and attacks you, or attacks everyone around it. I don't actually know. But the second event is something that takes place in a dry lake bed, so there will be a lot of sandstorm-like conditions, fighting a bunch of creatures. So one of the big things that they mentioned were these bounty hunts that we get to participate in, because that brings in a character, and this is also a little bit controversial, but they couldn't help themselves from trying to tie into the Fallout TV series. And so the person we will be getting these bounties from is none other than Adam bless me. the ghoul. It isn't exactly clear to what extent we will interact with the ghoul. At this point in time, it kind of just seems like he will give us bounties and he'll say little cool things and be cool and look cool and I don't know. What else does he do? Kill people, I guess, but I don't know if we'll actually get to see that. And this is where I take a little bit of issue. Is it impossible for the ghoul to be in Ohio only a few decades after the events of the Great War? Absolutely not. Is it reasonable for him to be in Ohio a few decades after the Great War? I don't know. Maybe? Sure. It seems a lot of people that kind of criticize this choice of shoehorning, or should I say including, I don't know, the ghoul into this expansion, focus on the purported impossibility of it, saying, hey, there's been several decades, that's more than enough time to work yourself from California over to Ohio. Never mind the fact that we don't know what it looks like between those two locations. It is so early after the Great War that it could be insane. But I don't doubt that the devs couldn't come up with some decent reasons for why he would be where he is. I do feel like sometimes the fan service or the compulsion to try and fit things in places where we don't really expect is really strong with Bethesda. And you know, I'm all for fan service, but we also don't need to tie in the TV series to Fallout 76 in such a direct way. To me, it just feels a little forced, and maybe I'll change my mind after I play through, and it'll feel, I don't know, rather natural or be okay with that. But I had similar sentiments when Fallout 76 released, and they were showing us things like the Brotherhood of Steel all the way over in West Virginia, only a few decades after the Great War, and similarly the super mutants that show up in Appalachia so early on after the Great War. It all feels like fan service. It feels like we can't have a Fallout game if it doesn't have certain elements, and that's just not true. We can have a Fallout game without the Brotherhood of Steel. We can have a Fallout game without super mutants, and we can have a Fallout game without bringing in prominent characters from the Fallout TV show. Okay, enough of that, because there was something interesting about these bounties. There are apparently two levels of them. One is a more public event because the boss or the bounty is a lot more difficult to take down, while there are lower level ones, and there can only be one of those happening at any given moment. Whereas the lower level bounties, we can do as many of those as we like. But I thought this was interesting because they specifically mentioned that these bounties are raiders, musicians, clowns, or grannies. Why am I all of a sudden thinking about that Wild Wasteland encounter in New Vegas where we get attacked by 3 grandmas with rolling pins? We will have to see how all of this shakes out and how or why the ghoul and how and why the ghoul turned into the ghoul. At any rate, there is a really valuable reward weapon. I don't know exactly what it is, and maybe some data miner does know what it is. I wouldn't be surprised though if it is somehow tied to the ghoul. But I am looking forward to Burning Springs and playing through it. So far, what I've experienced has been quite good. I just really need to rebuild my character. Holy crap, I'm struggling a little bit on that front. Let me know what you think of Burning Springs. Have you been able to play it a little bit? If not, what do you think of some of the controversy behind it? Is it just normal Fallout players complaining about Fallout things, or do you think there's something to it? So that's it. But, as usual, I like to put one new item behind me that kind of tells or shows something about myself. And right now there is a PCB back there. That's actually a framework PCB because I actually really enjoy opening up and working on electronics, laptops, actually more than just electronics, but that's something that I'm doing a lot right now. I mean, just look at what I have going on over here. And I've been able to help people out. I've gotten my dad's computer back up and going, and I'm hoping to get my brother's working a lot better than it currently is. Take care of your electronics, repair them when you need to so you don't just throw them out, and then put Linux on them. That's it for me today. Rat out.